night. Trump sows chaos in the GOP, the power vacuum in Libya, and a Beijing playboy buys into the art world. The State Department says it's concerned by violent incidents involving protesters and Turkish security personnel in D.C. on Tuesday. The clashes took place outside the Turkish ambassador's residence, where at least 9 people were injured, when men who appeared to be President Recep Erdogan's bodyguards were seen beating protesters, while police tried to break up the escalating brawl. Armenian and Kurdish groups organized the demonstration to protest Erdogan's crackdown on dissent and consolidation of power. Chelsea Manning says whatever is ahead of her is more important than the past. The transgender icon and former Army intelligence analyst was released from U.S. military prison in Fort Leavenworth early Wednesday after serving 7 years. Manning was sentenced to 35 years in 2013 for leaking thousands of sensitive military documents to WikiLeaks. But in one of his final acts, President Obama commuted her sentence. Oscar Lopez Rivera, the Puerto Rican nationalist and former member of the terrorist group FALN, was freed after 36 years in custody. President Obama commuted his sentence, a controversial move to those who condemn his role in a string of bombings in New York, Chicago, and D.C. in the 1970s and 80s. Today, Lopez was unrepentant.
Todo pueblo colonizado tiene derecho a luchar por su independencia usando todos los medios a su alcance, incluyendo la fuerza.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement officials announced that arrests of undocumented immigrants are up 38% this year from the same time period in 2016. In the 100 days since President Trump signed his executive order on immigration enforcement, the agency has arrested more than 41,000 people. Non-criminal arrests of undocumented immigrants increased from approximately 4,200 to more than 10,800. The Department of Justice announced this evening that it's appointing a special counsel to oversee the investigation into President Trump's ties to Russia. Former FBI Director Robert Mueller. Mueller was FBI Director when James Comey was Deputy Attorney General. Comey then took over the director job from Mueller. As special counsel, Mueller will report to current Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. In his letter appointing Mueller, Rosenstein said, quote, "My decision is not a finding that crimes have been committed or that any prosecution is warranted." The third day of scandal at the White House. The revelation that President Trump may have asked James Comey to halt his investigation is taking its toll down the street on Capitol Hill.
Damn, it's hot here. You guys gotta get the AC cranked.
House Speaker Paul Ryan acknowledged that the chatter about Trump, Comey, and Flynn is starting to take up all the air in the room.
People in America turn on the TV and they think this is all that's happening. This is all we're doing and all we're discussing. That's just not the case. I want the American people to know that we're busy, hard at work, fixing their problems.
But the chatter is going to continue, especially since the Senate Intelligence Committee has now formally asked James Comey to testify in an open session. Ryan can insist that all the Trump news isn't keeping Congress from accomplishing big things, but he and his Republican colleagues aren't going to be able to ignore it. So now they have to figure out how to engage.
So what are Republicans in Congress telling reporters when we ask them questions about the Comey memo? Well, a lot of them are doing the whole, "I'm sorry, I can't talk to you right now because I'm a very important congressman and I've just gotten a very important phone call on my cell phone" act.
Do you want Comey to testify?
Those that do talk to us give us basically one of 3 takes. The first is that maybe this whole Comey memo thing is fake news. You got to be cautious.
We need to see the facts and laid out. All we're dealing on right now is media reports.
The second take, and this is my personal favorite, is that if Trump did say something to Comey, he's probably just joking.
He jokes a lot, and sometimes when you say a joke, everybody gets a joke. But when it's written on paper, it sounds very differently.
But the third take shows that some congressional Republicans are actually really starting to freak out. They're starting to talk about things like independent investigations. They're starting to mention things like the W word.
I think it's reaching the point where it's of Watergate size and scale and a couple of other scandals that you and I have seen.
These Republicans are few in number, but that might be changing. I talked to one of them, Representative Carlos Curbelo of Florida. Hillary Clinton won his district by over 17 points. Curbelo didn't vote for Clinton, and he didn't vote for Trump either. And now he's trying to deal with a scandal that could take his entire party's agenda off course.
Maybe this is much ado about nothing. Maybe it's a very sad beginning to a new dark chapter in our history.
How long can you not get stuff done because of the president before it starts hurting your party's prospects in Congress?
Legislative work is difficult. The founders designed this place so that it would be very difficult for ideas, bills, to become law. So any aggravating factor on top of the structural challenges that we face, like distractions, scandals, controversies, news stories about questionable conduct, all of that takes a toll on the system.
Trump himself got a getaway day today, flying off to Connecticut to give the commencement address at the Coast Guard Academy. But it was clear that his frustrations traveled with him.
No politician in history has been treated worse or more unfairly.
And Secretary of Homeland Security John Kelly offered a novel use for the ceremonial sword the Academy had given him. Outside the event, anti-Trump protesters made it clear that they want the president to go.
Trump, go away!
Pro-Trump bikers showed up to drown out the demonstrators.
That's what America sounds like!
And they were just as adamant that Trump stay in office.
On what grounds are they going to impeach Donald Trump? For what? What the fuck has he done?
Impeachment is suddenly a legitimate topic on both sides of the debate. But how likely is it that it'll actually happen? Shauna Thomas explains.
There are 4 ways that President Trump could stop being the president. The first 2, death and resignation, aren't very likely. The second 2 are becoming something of a national obsession. Impeachment was the framers' method for removing a president, and here's how it works. A member introduces an impeachment resolution, or the whole House votes on a resolution to begin an inquiry. If the party in control is on board, the action begins with the Judiciary Committee, which holds hearings. Then it goes to the full House, where impeachment requires a simple majority vote. If the House votes yes, it then appoints members to act as prosecutors in the trial that will be held in the Senate. If 2/3 of the Senate votes to convict, the president goes. As anyone old enough to remember the Bill Clinton saga knows, the road is long and arduous and gross, and going down it can be politically toxic if the voters don't support it. It also actually requires evidence of treason or bribery or high crimes and misdemeanors, which is a fancy way of saying evil deeds, as opposed to just being a bad president. And even if you can prove that, impeachment relies on a huge amount of Republican members from Republican districts and states to vote against a Republican president. That has anti-Trumpers beginning to congregate around the other option that the Constitution provides, the 25th Amendment. In this model, it's the president's own team that kicks him out. Under Section 4 of the 25th Amendment, if the vice president and a majority of the heads of the executive departments think the president is unfit to discharge his duties, they send a declaration in writing to Congress, and the vice president actually assumes the office of acting president. If the president disputes this, also in writing, he gets his job back, in which case the VP and the cabinet have 4 days to submit another declaration to Congress that, nope, this guy cannot be president. The VP becomes acting president again, and Congress has 21 days to decide the issue. Ousting the president for good requires a 2/3 vote in both the House and the Senate. In other words, this option is even harder to pull off than the first. It requires the president's own appointees to turn against him and probably lose their jobs in the process. And then it requires even more votes in Congress than impeachment does. The 25th Amendment process has never been tried, and only 2 presidents have ever been impeached, and neither was convicted, though Nixon might have been if he hadn't resigned. Neither removal route is technically impossible, but both would require buy-ins from Republicans up and down government and from a clear majority of the public. So it's going to take more than phantom memos and ill-advised firings to get there.
Among the outrages rocking Washington is the accusation that Trump shared highly classified information about ISIS with Russian envoys in the Oval Office last week. Yesterday, it came to light that the source of that information was Israel. Today, Hind Hassan spoke with Danny Yatom, the former chief of Mossad, Israel's intelligence service, about how serious the breach was.
If you had been the chief of Mossad when something like this happened, what would your response have been?
Firstly, it would have made me pissed, and I would have come with many complaints to my counterparts, and unless they commit that something like that will not happen again, we will stop transferring to them very sensitive information.
Is there a possibility that because of the apparent mistake that Donald Trump has made, that lives could be put at risk?
Yes.
That's a very serious situation.
Of course. It is very severe and also very unique. It does not happen every day.
In that case, then why is the Israeli ambassador to the United States saying that that Israel still has full confidence in its intelligence sharing relationship with the United States?
No, we have full confidence. I say it as well, because we will continue to cooperate. But we
but you can't say you have full confidence when you're saying that the president made a mistake.
No. I have full confidence in the intelligence apparatuses.
Does that mean that Israel has full confidence in the intelligence structures, but not full confidence in the United States president?
No, I didn't say it. I said that the Americans, the experts, should make sure that something like that will never reiterate.
So are you saying that this is quite an exceptional case?
It is very, very difficult and takes a long time to develop a reliable source, and especially a source in a group like ISIS, and to being able to send information to Israel or the United States from a high headquarters of ISIS, it is something very unique and very special. If this is going to be harmed or ruined, then it's a very severe loss.
6 years after Muammar Gaddafi's fall, fighting between rival governments and militias has plunged Libya into anarchy. Last year, ISIS took control of Sirte, the former strongman's hometown. U.S. forces pounded the city with airstrikes in support of Libyan soldiers, 700 of whom died in a 7-month campaign to retake the city. But the fractious militias guarding Sirte have no real control, and ISIS is regrouping nearby.
هذه منطقة حي المنارة. أي حتى علامات البيوت ما هناكش. يعني مختفية ملامح البيت يعني مختفي بالكامل.
All of this was Daesh.
كله داعش. هذا كله منتهي الشارع الثاني هذا خلاص.
This used to be the largest ISIS stronghold outside Iraq and Syria. Until a few months ago, thousands of ISIS fighters had held Sirte for nearly 2 years. They drove out almost all of the city's 80,000 residents.
هذا طيران. هذا طيران.
This is American?
أمريكي يعني.
They hit it like that.
طيران هذا. تعال. بالنسبة لأول دخول لي للبيت طبعا الإنسان يصيب بصدمة يعني كيف تركت البيت ورجعت تلقاها في حال تاني يعني شبه خالي ومدمر ما فيش أمل للرجوع ما فيش أمل لأنك تعود الحياة بسرعة وترجع لمكانك كيف قبل وتعيش حياتك طبيعي.
Kamal Mohammed used to teach at a local school before ISIS moved in. His wife and 5 children fled last August when the heaviest fighting began. This is one of the first times he's been back. ISIS fighters converted his home into a base, turning this residential neighborhood into a full-blown battleground.
هذا جاري هذا ينتقل من بيت هنا لعند جاري. حافرين نفق هنا. هذه كلها الرملة هذه من.
Where does it lead this tunnel?
تمشي للشارع الثاني هذه. ماشية تحت القطران وماشية للشارع الثاني. يعني مستعملين كحركة يعني مرور ما بين شارع وشارع. هذا سطح البيت وهذا حوش الوالد.
That's your father's one?
ايه. يس. كلها انتهى يعني الذكريات انتهن يعني. وهذه أطلال بقايا أطلال خالي من البشر وخالي من مقومات الحياة بالكامل.
How was ISIS able to come in and take such control here?
بالقوة يعني الرهبة والخوف وبعدين في غياب الدولة والفراغ هذا كل شيء يصير يعني الناس متباعدة على بعض وكان ملتحمة في بعض ما كانش يصير اللي صار هذا.
Since the fall of Gaddafi in 2011, Libya has steadily descended into chaos. That's what created a vacuum for groups like ISIS to move into. Sirte is now under the control of local militia units, but these fighters haven't been paid in months, and there are fears the dangers aren't over. There is an official Libyan army, loyal to the internationally backed government in Tripoli, but there are many other factions vying for supremacy. That created the void filled by ISIS, and things aren't improving.
داعش حاليا نقدر نسموها بالحيوان الضاري المصاب في ليبيا.
Ahmed al-Sharif is part of the Libyan army, but even for them, ISIS continues to pose a threat.
نظرا لضعف الحكومات المتوالية من 2011 لحد الآن لا توجد سيطرة للمؤسسات الدولة على كامل مناطق ليبيا. لدينا الآن مناخ خصب لتشكل عصابات إجرامية أخرى من غير على غرار داعش ممكن تكون أكبر من داعش.
20-year-old Ahmed al-Ashir was one of nearly 100 ISIS fighters captured inside Sirte.
بعد سلمونا سلاح كلاشينكوف سلمونا معه سترة جعبة السلاح مع 3 مخازن.
He said he was talking with us of his own free will, but a prison guard was present throughout. Ahmed is Libyan. He's from a good family in Tripoli. His father is a politician. But he was inspired to join ISIS in Sirte after reading news reports of their exploits. Ahmed explained the inner workings of the organization, as he calls it, made up mostly of foreign fighters, and how they were able to take control of a city thousands of miles from the group's de facto capital in Syria.
فتمركزوا فيها وما بعد انتهاء حرب 2011 تمركزوا فيها أنصار الشريعة بايعوا الدولة الإسلامية بايعوا بكر البغدادي وأصبحوا تنظيم الدولة. صارت مدينة مفتوحة يعني تحاصر فيها تطلع منها وتخش مفتوحة على الصحراء وقريبة للحقول النفطية.
Do you think it could happen again somewhere else?
يبقى لنا فيها صراعات سياسية واجد نفس العراق وسوريا يستطيع أن يكون نفسه أكثر من مرة يعني يفشل ويكون نفسه.
Ahmed's future looks bleak, but ISIS could still have one in Libya.
والله في المجموعة دي تحاول أنها تبقي نفسها في ليبيا. على إذا كان إلا حورب يعني توبع خلوش يدير خلايا ثانية بس. لكن إذا ترك على راحته يكون نفسه من جديد.
While there's nothing left of ISIS in Sirte, many of the fighters escaped and have regrouped just a couple of 100 miles up the coast.
Tomorrow, the FCC will vote on a proposal that would begin the process of killing net neutrality, overturning regulations that the FCC passed just 2 years ago under President Obama that prevented internet service providers from favoring or discriminating against websites or content. Since the vote was proposed in late April, more than 1.5 million comments have flooded the FCC's website, the vast majority from people in favor of keeping net neutrality. But Trump-appointed FCC Chairman Ajit Pai doesn't appear to be listening. Antonia Hilton has more.
Thanks to a little-known law called the Administrative Procedure Act, Thursday's vote won't be the final blow to net neutrality. It's actually just the beginning of a months-long debate. For 2 months, citizens and organizations will be able to submit initial comments for and against the FCC's move. And then for 1 additional month, you can submit replies to other people's comments. When the agency debated the rule change 3 years ago, grassroots organizing, public opposition by companies like Google and Facebook, and a viral John Oliver segment prompted a record 3.7 million comments and a temporary FCC website crash.
That's right. The FCC are literally inviting internet comments at this address.
Comments become part of an official record. So when the FCC releases its final decision, it's supposed to engage substantive points from the opposition. But it's unclear how much the record matters to Pai.
In my view, at least, Title II has had harmful effects on the marketplace. It has depressed investment in this country in terms of capital expenditures by broadband providers, big and small.
But the public interest group Free Press found that investment by publicly traded broadband companies has actually increased. There have also been repeated reports of anti-net neutrality bots impersonating real people in the FCC comments. And Pai hasn't shown much interest in investigating who generated them. He has, however, made this video about people being mean to him on Twitter.
@Fluffy Destoya tweets, Ajit Pai, why do you hate America? Why do I hate America? Why do I hate America? Skinny jeans, kale, the Raiders, people who say acronyms like BAE and claim to be woke. I mean, what more evidence do you need?
The FCC's comment system has just literally melted down. When I was at the FCC, every time there was a discrepancy with the number of comments, every time there was a technological breakdown, we took responsibility for what was going on. Chairman Pai has done the exact opposite.
If they roll back net neutrality rules, Pai and his colleagues at the FCC will need to face opposition arguments and evidence in the official record, including comments. If they don't, a lawsuit can be brought by any person impacted by the rule change, which is basically everyone.
Michael Xufu Huang is a prodigy in the Chinese art world. He began collecting at 16, founded a highly influential contemporary art museum in Beijing at age 20, and now sits on the board of the New Museum in New York. He's also a proud member of an American fraternity who graduates college this week.
At first blush, Michael Xufu Huang looks like a regular student at the University of Pennsylvania.
I just want a full American experience. Penn has such a great Greek system because it really has a campus. It's not like if you go to NYU or Columbia, you're in New York, you just go clubbing with your friends.
But unlike most of his classmates or his frat brothers at Zeta Psi, the now 23-year-old Huang knows exactly what he'll be doing once he hits the workforce.
I feel there's urgency in China to have museums, not just galleries. There has been a gap in the institutional scene, and we really try to engage the younger audience. We make our documentaries about our collection, about our shows. It's very educational. I think that's the mission of a museum.
Xufu, as Huang is known, is the co-founder of M Woods, a nonprofit contemporary art museum in Beijing's 798 Art District. Founded in 2014 with Lin Han and Wanwan Lai, M Woods gets about 3,000 visitors a week. But these upstarts weren't always respected. Xufu and crew are frequently dubbed bobos or bohemian bourgeois, basically hipsters with money.
Do people sort of ever cast shade? Like, who are these like young, rich, like bobo types deciding that they can disrupt the art world?
In the beginning, we definitely had a lot of doubts. But now because of, I think, the power of social media and the rise of post-internet art, we really have an influence.
What is post-internet art? Like, how would you categorize that?
For me, I think it's art that's dealing with this topic of technology and internet, and in some ways using technology to make the work.
The Frieze Art Fair on New York's Randall's Island is one of the biggest art markets in the US. With China besting the US at art auctions last year, Xufu's taste-making contributions to China's art scene are becoming increasingly valuable.
What do you usually do when you come here?
I look around. I hope to discover new artists. My usual route is going to the younger galleries first, just because they're the ones that I feel is most exciting.
Michael's finished curating his upcoming exhibition next month, but he's always scoping out new work from his favorite artists for future shows.
So this is an artist that you actually collect.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about it.
So Pamela Rosenquist, she's an artist who deals with the idea of human presence. So the piece I'm going to show in my exhibition will be her liquids in bottled waters and in a fridge.
So yeah, human present trapped in commercialism, trapped in a technological product.
Yes.
Xufu's a dedicated art patron, and while he believes that a background in art history is crucial to his career, an Ivy League degree was also a condition of his parents who underwrite his art collecting.
What is your sort of like art allowance?
I don't really have like a budget. It really depends on the work.
Xufu's mission is to inject a younger sensibility to the art scene in China through education and inclusiveness as the country's interest in art grows.
We really believe in art without boundary. We like to do shows that's comparing the old to the new, from west to the east. And people in China really respond to that because they're interested in contemporary art in the Western world, but they don't have a great knowledge on that. We make it very accessible, and we really want to provoke thinking, but we're really trying to make it, like, engaging.
That's Vice News Tonight for Wednesday, May 17th.